Should the Dallas Cowboys seriously consider blowing up their entire roster? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting the way we'd like them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. No Landon McCool today. He is still on vacation. You can still follow him, though, at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions in another solo show. You guys get a lot of me for the next couple of days. I hope you enjoy. But let's get to your questions. We've got a couple of really, really good ones, including just how good is Mike McCarthy as a head coach? Where should Marquise Bell play in 2024? But this first question comes from Lord Dilly. He wants to know, should the Dallas Cowboys seriously consider blowing up the roster? Should they trade Micah? Should they let Dak Prescott walk? What would that look like if the Cowboys decide that that is the best option? First of all, let me say, that is not the preferred option. I think the best option for the Cowboys to have continued success is to keep your three best players, which are clearly Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. You can add Trayvon Diggs in there. You can add Tyler Smith. You can add DaRon Bland and figure a way out to make things work on the edges. I think that's the best case or best scenario to get the Cowboys back to the Super Bowl, to the NFC Championship, whatever your goals are. That's the most likely way to do it because it's really hard to accumulate star players and it's really hard to get those star players at key positions. And when you start to rank the most important positions in the NFL, quarterback, edge rusher, wide receiver, and corner are four of the top five. The only one that the Cowboys don't currently have right now is left tackle or offensive tackle. But maybe you could make the argument they do. They have Tyler Smith, who they're just playing at left guard. Obviously, they hope Tyler Guyton can be that guy, but it's really hard to find top 10 players at those five positions and keep all those guys under the age of 30 at the same time. So I think, again, in a perfect world, you find a way to sign Dak, you find a way to keep CeeDee, you lock Micah Parsons up to a long-term deal, and you figure everything else out. Maybe you make a change with the coach. Maybe you have a different style of offense. Maybe you start investing even more in the offensive line. Whatever your philosophy or strategy is there, I think that's the best way. But let's talk about the blow it up strategy because I look at this as two different paths that the Cowboys could go on if that's the plan. The first one is a rebuild without Dak Prescott. And I'm starting to wonder if this isn't where the Cowboys are going to be leaning, where basically they're going to try to reset the rookie quarterback clock, right? That so many teams are trying to exploit now. Let Dak Prescott play out the 2024 season. It's going to suck, but let him walk in free agency, gain your third round comp pick. And then in 2025 and then in 2026, start to reset your cap a little bit, shed some of the dead cap money. By 2026, Dak will be completely off your books. And that allows you to keep CeeDee Lamb, let's say going into the 2025 season, CeeDee Lamb, who will be 26, Micah Parsons, who will be 25 or 26 at the time. You still have those really young guys. Now you have the cap space to lock up a Tyler Smith, to lock up a DaRon Bland. But the key to that rebuild is, number one, finding a rookie quarterback, a young quarterback that you can develop, who's cheap. And it's also finding the right head coach that can navigate you through some seasons of rocky quarterback play. I think there are a lot of teams out there that have awesome rosters, but the quarterback play holds them back. I mean, look at a couple of the teams that I cover. The Raiders have an awesome roster, but the lack of quarterback play, even with Aiden O'Connell, who was a 4th-round pick that performed well as a rookie, still isn't enough to get that team to the playoffs. You look at Pittsburgh with, they had Kenny Pickett. Now they're doing it with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. That roster's awesome outside of the quarterback, but is it going to be enough to beat the Patrick Mahomes in the AFC, the Josh Allens and the Joe Burrows and Lamar Jacksons? Probably not. So you have to get really, really lucky. I do think that is probably the best strategy in order to keep your top guys and continue to draft, build, if you want to go that direction. But to get to the listener's actual question, what does it look like if you move on from all 3 of these guys? That's when it gets really scary. And that's when this thing gets real, real wonky. Of the 3, I think they're most likely to move on from Dak Prescott just because of the age, right? And because of the cost. I think after that, trading Micah and CD gets really, really hard. Micah is the better player of the 2. And again, I'm a huge CD Lamb fan, so that's hard for me to say. But Micah is the better player of the 2. He would likely garner the most in a trade just because a team would get more contract control, right? He was drafted in 2021. CD Lamb drafted in 2020. CD wants a deal now. Micah doesn't have a deal right now. So you could theoretically trade Micah right now and probably get more. But if you're trading Micah, I think you're looking at the Khalil Mack deal, which was done, several years, I guess 5 years ago now, where Khalil Mack got traded for 2 first-round picks and a 3rd-round pick back. I think Micah is better than Khalil Mack. He's younger than Khalil Mack. So you're looking at probably multiple first-round picks. And then for CeeDee Lamb, I would have a really, really hard time trading CeeDee Lamb away for anything less than multiple first-round picks. Now, maybe you only get back a 1st and a 3rd because of the contract, but that's the way you do it. You try to accumulate as many assets as possible, probably not just for 2025, but probably for 2026 as well. And if you're trading CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons, well, then you should start considering maybe trying to sell some of the other veterans away at the same time, right? Maybe Zach Martin would be interested in going to a different team and signing another 1-year extension. Maybe DeMarcus Lawrence, you could get back a 3rd or 4th round pick. Start moving some of the other assets on your team that you don't believe are cornerstone players. I think the only guys that would be untouchable, maybe there's not even a list of untouchable. If you're trading CeeDee Lamb and you're trading Micah Parsons, there is no such thing as untouchable. Now, I don't know if Tyler Smith would have a lot of trade value because, he's an all-pro left guard or Pro Bowl caliber left guard. Maybe a team would be interested in Tyler Smith, trading a 1st-round pick and more for Tyler Smith. But this one's hard because now you're talking about a multi-year tank. Right? You're talking about not only being bad for 2024 and 2025, you're talking about potentially a 2, 3, 4-year tank, something similar to what Houston has done, in the kind of post Deshaun Watson era. And even Deshaun Watson in 2020 played almost the full season. They went 4-12. 2021, 2022 were a disaster. But you did see that strategy ultimately pay off, right? They stunk for a couple of years. I think they won a total of 6 games, maybe 7 games over a 3-year stretch. And they lucked into, that's the wrong word. They picked CJ Stroud at number 2. He probably should have went number 1. And all of a sudden, with the right coach and the right quarterback, they were able to turn things around. And now their future is brighter than ever. So there is some hope if you decide to do that. The Texans also traded away a star receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. Now, they didn't get as much as I think everybody thought they would, but there have been teams to do this. It's just really hard to accomplish. And I think it's even harder to accomplish when you're the Dallas Cowboys, and I think it's hard to accomplish because there's an expectation with the Cowboys. And I also wonder with Jerry Jones, is he really going to want to completely tear things down to the bones and start over? My guess is no. I do think there is a possibility that they move on from one of those three players. I think Dak is probably the most likely just because he has the most control over this, but look for the Cowboys to find creative ways to keep all three of these guys and try to continue to retool rather than rebuild. It's just not in their DNA to rebuild, even though it is a tiny bit exciting to think about what it could potentially look like if they did strip everything down to the bones and start over. Let's get to a question about Mike McCarthy and just how valuable he is to the Dallas Cowboys next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you have quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Listen, I absolutely love LinkedIn. It isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, this next question comes from Tim. He wants to know, the Cowboys do fine against lesser talented teams because the Cowboys have had a really good roster. When the talent level gets more level, like such as the Eagles, Bills, 49ers, Packers, they get smoked. This has to be where coaching and game plan is a factor. Are the Cowboys coaches just not cutting it? I think this is a very good question. One of the things that I've always learned from and read about when it comes to coaching is that when it's the regular season, your weekly coaching matters more than maybe your game day coaching. And what that means is your preparation, uh, installing the playbook, keeping track of your injuries, all that kind of stuff. And this is where I think Mike McCarthy is a very, very good coach. And I think he's done a very good job of building a staff that helps him be successful from Monday through Saturday. You don't just win 12 games a season based on pure luck. You need to be a very good coach, managing players, managing the coaching staff, managing the practice schedule. And because Mike McCarthy has been a head coach for so long, he knows kind of what buttons to push throughout the season. He knows when to push his players. He knows when to pull back. He knows how to manage the injuries. So this is the big one here. I want to keep coming back to this with the injuries. You look at how healthy the Cowboys have been going into the last three postseasons compared to the rest of the league. I mean, it's been unbelievable. I mean, last year, outside of Leighton Vander Esch, who suffered a career-ending neck injury, and Trayvon Diggs, who tore his ACL in practice, they were incredibly healthy, absolutely incredibly healthy. You go to the 2022 playoffs, they had everybody. I mean, Tyron Smith was back playing right tackle. Tyler Smith was at left tackle. You had your corners. CeeDee Lamb was healthy. Tony Pollard was healthy. You had Zeke. You had Dak. I think Mike McCarthy doesn't get enough credit for how he has managed injuries for this team. If you go back and you look at the Jason Garrett era, how banged up those teams were, I think McCarthy has done a significantly better job of winning in that area. And I also think he's done a good job of helping build the depth. One of the things that McCarthy does not only on offense, but also on defense, is they use a heavy rotation. He makes sure that, on defense, you're seeing sometimes 18, 19 guys play on defense in any single game. And that does help keep the players fresh. But when it comes to coaching in the regular season, talent wins out more so than coaching advantage, right? If the Cowboys have a supremely talented team, you expect them, and they should beat teams with lesser competition. But once you get to the playoffs, that's where the coaching difference really matters. And unfortunately, you look at their playoff losses, they've lost to Kyle Shanahan twice. They've lost to Matt LaFleur. Um, those are just better coaches than Mike McCarthy. That's not a shot at Mike McCarthy. It's not. It's really not. I think most people consider Kyle Shanahan conservatively a top 5 coach. I think he's a top 3 coach. And for my money, the only coach that's better than him is Andy Reid. I think Matt LaFleur is widely considered a top 10 coach. And I think McCarthy is a better than average coach. Unfortunately, unless you just have significantly more talent than your opponent in the playoffs, having a good-ish head coach probably isn't going to cut it, because in the playoffs, the talent level is relatively, equal, and you need your coach to be aggressive, smart. You need to be able to make quick decisions on the fly. And I think one of the issues that McCarthy has, again, I'm gonna praise him before I tear him down. I think he's really good at building the game plan from Monday to Saturday, but where he struggles is his ability to adjust in game. I don't think he is the best at taking knowledge that he sees on the sideline, internalizing it, and then turning it into better plays, right? And maybe this is just because he's calling the plays from the sideline, right? He's got a lot on his plate, certainly now with him calling plays and running the offense. Maybe he needs some better people up in the booth helping him see what's going on the field and then making the proper adjustments. Now, he has won a Super Bowl. We need to give him credit for that. He did it with Aaron Rodgers when Aaron Rodgers went bonkers. But I think at the same time, his defenses did a fantastic job. I think he designed a really unique offense back in 2010 that helped maximize Aaron Rodgers. But I do wonder if McCarthy is the type of coach that you hire to make your program competitive, legitimate. Let me put it this way. I think a team like the Carolina Panthers would love to have Mike McCarthy right now, right? Somebody that makes them instantly a contender in the NFC. They win all the games they should, or for at least the most part, win double-digit games to get you in the postseason, right? But for the Cowboys, who've had this stretch of nearly 30 years now without reaching the NFC Championship game, I don't know if he is the right coach to kind of get you over the hump, right? I don't know if he's that guy that's going to be able to out game plan a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay or a Dan Campbell or insert the name. But I do have confidence that he's going to get you to the playoffs every year, and that is extremely valuable. Again, make no mistake about it. Having a coach that can almost guarantee you, outside of a quarterback injury, can guarantee you to win double-digit games and get you to the postseason is valuable. And I even want to go back to the 2022 season when Dak Prescott missed 5 or 6 games or whatever the number was. He did a really good job of steadying the ship and winning games with Cooper Rush and keeping the belief up and keeping the train going. So he does deserve credit there. It's just when you get into these big-time games against teams that have similar talent level, I don't know if he is the best in-game coach to help them get over to the next level. So I hope that answered your question. I am a fan of Mike McCarthy. I think I see all these lists on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, where Mike McCarthy's ranked as like the 18th best head coach in the league. Like, that's nonsense. His track record deserves him to be at least in the top 12. You don't win this many games without being a good coach. You don't win a Super Bowl without being a relatively good coach. I don't think he gets enough credit, but I I'm not going to say he's a top 5, top 6 coach either. So it's that weird spot of almost being in no man's land with a coach. And unfortunately, I think that's where we are right now with Mike McCarthy. All right, let's talk about Marquise Bell, who really had a solid season for the Cowboys in year 2. What will his year 3 look like? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Listen, I love sports. I love sports so much that I never want them to stop. There's nothing better for me than at the end of a long day, sitting on my couch, turning on the TVs, and just watching a game. It's just so therapeutic for me. But unfortunately, with the playoffs winding down, again, no basketball playoffs, no NHL playoffs, we just have fewer and fewer games to watch on TV. And the sports aren't sporting like we'd like them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every day, it's going to be another solo show for me on Friday. Make sure you're downloading the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your podcast. Landon will be back on Monday. And guess what? Once we get back to Monday, we're talking about training camp. The Cowboys will report in just a couple of days. Rookies will be reporting next week. We are right back into the thick of football season. We've made it. But again, one more solo show, and then Landon will be back. But let's finish up these questions here. We've got some really, really good ones about Marquise Bell. This one's from Ed. He wants to know, what will Marquise Bell's role be in 2024? What could the Cowboys potentially do to give him more snaps? So this one's really tough for me because I think Marquise Bell kind of got a raw deal in some ways, right? He got moved to linebacker pretty late in training camp. And then all of a sudden, he was one of the team's starting linebackers. And then once Leighton Vander Esch went down, he was a full-time linebacker. I know there were some games where he struggled. The Packers game was one of them, obviously. The Bills game was another one. But I don't want people to think that he wasn't a good player last year. There were times, and I remember talking with all of you listeners out there about his performance. There was a good stretch where he was Pro Football Focus's number 1 rated linebacker in the entire NFL. He finished the season with I'm looking at right among linebackers with at least 700 snaps. He had the 5th highest coverage grade of any linebacker in the NFL. I mean, he was outstanding. He was also pretty good as a pass rusher whenever the Cowboys deployed him there. He just really struggled against the run, which of course he struggled against the run. He's a former safety that's playing linebacker in his first year and really his first full year as an NFL player. As you know, in 2022, he was a practice squad player, hardly ever saw the field. And then in 2023, not only is he playing, but he's playing a new position. So I am going to cut him a little bit of slack. But let me make my prediction for what happens with Marquise Bell in 2024. And I'll tell you what I would like them to do. So my prediction is that he is going to be the primary backup for Donovan Wilson. And that's not a bad spot to be in. Donovan Wilson's getting a little bit older, has not been the most durable player throughout his career. And I think as a strong safety in Mike Zimmer's defense, who will play a lot near the line of scrimmage, will be used as a blitzer a lot, I think Marquise Bell as a primary backup for Donovan Wilson does make sense. And maybe there's a chance as we get closer to the middle of the season, at the end of the season, maybe we start to see a rotation at safety. Try to keep those guys fresher because Bell is the significantly younger player. He's the better athlete. Maybe that's what we see. And then we see Wanye Thomas be the primary backup to Malik Hooker. And I think those guys are a little bit interchangeable. So maybe we just see all 4 of them move in and out a little bit. But what I would like to see happen here is I would love to see Marquise Bell used as like a nickel linebacker, right? When it's 3rd and 7 Hey, as much as I love Eric Kendricks, I want DeMarvion Overshown and Marquise Bell as my two linebackers in coverage because those guys can both fly to the flats in cover two. They can go down the middle of the seam and cover tight ends. They're also incredibly athletic. So if you want to send them on stunts or blitzes or however you want to do that, you just have a lot more speed at your linebacker position. And yeah, it doesn't matter as much about stopping the run because most teams aren't going to run on 3rd and 7 unless you're Arthur Smith. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just don't know if Mike Zimmer is going to feel comfortable doing that because he's historically just left his two starting linebackers on the field for all downs. So to me, that means it's probably going to be Eric Kendricks and probably going to be DeMarvion Overshown, and Damone Clark will be the primary backup, probably to Overshown, probably. Um, and then Bell will just be relegated to safety play again. I hope that's not the case because Marquise Bell is too talented of a player just to pigeonhole him as a safety. And we saw that last year. Like there were certain games and certain matchups where Marquise Bell was absolutely incredible, right? If you're playing against a spread team that, is more open to just throwing the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game, I want Bell on the field because of his coverage ability. But if you're playing Buffalo or you're playing the 49ers or you're playing a team that is going to utilize a lot of play action, it's going to use, they're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to stay balanced. It's not the best matchup for Marquise Bell. I'm just hoping that the Cowboys have a plan to get him 20-ish snaps a game. 20, that's not a ton. That can help keep Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson healthy. And again, this is where I'm going to praise Mike McCarthy again. McCarthy has historically done a good job of rotating players in to make sure that his veterans aren't overworked and not burned out by the time we get to Thanksgiving. So I do expect Bell and Wanye Thomas to be on the field. I expect Damone Clark to get snaps. I expect Mike Zimmer to be forced maybe a little bit to utilize all these players that he has on the roster because again, it's a 17 game season, regular season. And I think Mike McCarthy knows that, or at least hopes that his team is a playoff team and that they're going to be playing 18, 19, 20 playoff games at least, right? So utilize your young players, let the fresh legs help some of the older players. I just really admire Marquise Bell. I thought he had a much, much better sophomore season than anybody could have anticipated. And I hope that he has the opportunity to continue to get more snaps on this Dallas Cowboys defense. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Again, every day, as I will be back tomorrow. The last solo episode without Landon on Friday. Again, he'll be back on Monday. We'll start getting you ready for training camp. Go download the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Again, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here on Friday.